For a long time, I assumed revenue could only grow one way. If I wanted more income, I had to build something new. A new offer, a new marketing system, a new channel. Everything depended on creating the next thing from scratch. And honestly, that worked for a while. Most early businesses grow exactly that way. You build something, test it, improve it, and eventually, the system starts producing income. But after the business started producing consistent cash, something about that approach began to feel slower than it used to. The more stable the income became, the more I started noticing something interesting in the market around me. There were already businesses producing revenue, real customers, real systems, real income streams. They were already built. And that forced a question I hadn't really asked before. Instead of building the next revenue stream, could I buy one? The first time you seriously consider buying revenue instead of building it, the entire map of growth changes. Up until that point, every dollar I had earned came from something we built ourselves. New clients meant new effort. New revenue meant new systems. Everything depended on time. But capital quietly changes that equation. Once a business starts producing surplus cash, time is no longer the only resource available. Now there's another lever sitting inside the system, capital. And capital creates a completely different way to expand. Instead of spending months or years trying to create the next income stream, sometimes you can acquire one that already exists. Someone else already spent the time figuring it out. They built the offer. They found the customers. They stabilized the revenue. That doesn't mean buying revenue is easy, but it does mean the starting point is completely different. Building revenue trades time for growth. Buying revenue trades capital for speed. That distinction became clearer the more I studied businesses that scaled faster than expected. At first, I thought they just had better ideas or stronger marketing. But looking closer, the pattern was different. They weren't building every new revenue stream internally. They were assembling them. Sometimes they launched something new from scratch. But other times, they acquired systems that already had customers and simply integrated them into the larger machine. That approach skips one of the most fragile phases of building. When you create revenue from scratch, the early stage is always unstable. You're testing whether the offer works. You're figuring out messaging. You're experimenting with channels. Sometimes it takes months just to know if the system will survive. Buying revenue often starts past that phase. The customers already exist. The system already produces income. The basic structure already works. But the trade-off becomes obvious quickly. Buying revenue means inheriting a system you didn't personally design, and that creates a different kind of work. Now, the challenge isn't invention, it's understanding. You have to understand why the system works. What keeps the customers buying? Which parts of the machine are stable and which parts are fragile? Because revenue that looks stable from the outside can depend on invisible dynamics, relationships, processes, operational habits. Buying revenue doesn't remove the work. It just changes where the work begins. The real shift happens when you realize revenue can be assembled, not just invented. Once that idea settles in, the way you look at opportunities starts changing. Instead of asking what to build next, I started asking a different question. What already exists that could fit inside the system? There are thousands of small businesses producing revenue right now. Some are under-operated. Some lack distribution. Some simply reach the limits of their current owners. And sometimes, those businesses can grow faster under a different structure. That realization opens a completely new layer of growth. The business stops expanding only through effort. Now growth can happen through integration. Revenue streams combine. Capabilities stack. Entire systems plug into each other. And suddenly the pace of expansion is no longer limited to how quickly I can invent something new. Some revenue is built. Some revenue is acquired. The strongest systems eventually learn how to do both. That balance is what makes certain business ecosystems scale faster than others. If everything must be built internally, growth depends entirely on time. But when capital enters the picture, expansion becomes more flexible. Some things are still worth building, especially the core engine of the business, the thing that makes the system unique. But the surrounding layers can often be assembled. Customer bases, products, capabilities, entire revenue streams. Looking at businesses through that lens changed how I thought about expansion. The next stage of growth didn't always need to start from zero anymore. Sometimes the next piece of the system already existed. It just needed the right structure to bring it in. The moment you realize revenue can be acquired, the ceiling on growth moves much higher. Because now the business isn't limited to what you personally create. It can expand through ownership, through integration, through decisions about what belongs inside the system you're building. And when that shift happens, the question that used to drive everything, "What should we build next?" starts getting replaced by a more interesting one. What should this system own?